Hello, welcome to our video study through the book of Exodus. In our last couple of weeks, the last few chapters in Exodus, we've seen how God has been faithful to the Israelites in bringing them to Mount Sinai and establishing a covenant with them and giving them his commands, his expectations for how they should live. We've seen how the Israelites have rejected that love and mercy, have rejected those commands, have chosen to live for themselves, have chosen to make their own way, essentially, by doing what they wanted to do. And yet we've seen how Moses has interceded on their behalf and prayed that God would forgive them, that God would be merciful to them, and that God would continue to be with them, most specifically last week. And we see that God is a merciful God, and we see that God does care for his people as we look in Exodus chapter 34 this week. It begins with God giving Moses a command to remake the stone tablets which he had broken after the golden calf incident. So the first set of stone tablets apparently God had carved out of the side of Mount Sinai and had written the 10 Commandments, at least the 10 Commandments on. I don't know if there was more. We don't know if there was more or not on there. But Moses, when he came down and saw the golden calf incident, if you remember, slammed the tablets down and broke them. And so God gives Moses the command in Exodus 34. The Lord said to Moses, "Cut for yourselves 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke." So he gives Moses this command. Essentially, we're going to do this over again. You're going to remake these stone tablets. You're going to come up to Mount Sinai again, and I'm going to give you these commandments again. Verse 4, so Moses cut 2 tablets of stone like the first, and he rose early in the morning and went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. Then the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there, and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the 3rd and the 4th generation. And Moses quickly bowed his head to the earth and worshipped. And he said, "If now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us, for it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance." So this is incredible that as God is appearing to Moses again in the form of a cloud, as we looked at a little bit last week, that God would appear to Moses in this form of a cloud and talk with him in the tent of meeting. He appears to him again, and before this, there's this announcement made. We're not sure if this is God declaring this about himself or if this is an angel going before him, sort of as a herald to announce God is coming down now, and this is his character. But that he talks about how he's merciful, gracious, and slow to anger, and is abounding in mercy, in chesed, steadfast love for his people because of the relationship that he has with them. And that Moses once again appeals to this mercy and love and says, God, can you come among us? Can you be with us? Please be among us. We won't be able to make it without you. If you remember to last week in Exodus 33 when God had said, I can't come among this people because they're stiff-necked or I will consume them. And Moses had pleaded and asked God to be merciful to them and say, look, we're not going to make it without you. We need you among us. And so he continues on sort of that intercession here. And this is God's response to Moses in verse 10. He said, "Behold, I am making a covenant before all your people. I will do marvels such as I have not been created in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you." Interesting that after everything that's happened, when God way back in Exodus chapter 19 and 20 wanted to establish this covenant with them, which they broke, as we saw in Exodus 32, and now after Moses prayer for them and asking God to be merciful and to be amongst them, God reestablishes his commitment to this people, that he wants to establish this covenant with them. And then an interesting thing I see here is that God said he's going to do marvels or works among them that no one's ever seen before, greater than anything that anybody's ever seen before, which is pretty incredible when you consider some of the works that God's already done just in the book of Exodus amongst this group of people, that there's going to be something even greater that's yet to come. And he says, look, you still haven't even seen the greatest things that I'm going to do amongst this people. And God reaffirming his commitment and his covenant with the people of Israel, because even when we are not faithful, God is always faithful to keep his promises, which is incredible to think after everything that Israel's done, that God says, no, I am fully committed to you. But then notice in the next few verses that God gives Israel commands to the effect of making sure that they will stay committed to him. Notice in verse 11, he says, observe what I command you this day. Behold, I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Take care, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land to which you go, lest it become a snare in your midst. You shall tear down their altars, and break their pillars, and cut down their asherim, for you shall worship no other God. For the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and when they whore after their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and you are invited to eat of this sacrifice, and you take of their daughters for your sons, and their daughters whore after their gods, and make your sons whore after their gods, you shall not make for yourself any gods of cast metal. So even though God reaffirms his commitment to the people of Israel because he is faithful, he challenges Moses here to tell the people they need to make sure they are faithful to the covenant and that they don't fall into worshiping any of the other gods of the people amongst whom they're going to go. God says, look, this is my commitment. I'm going to destroy these people before you to give you the land that I promised to you. But you got to be careful that you're not going to enter into a covenant with any of these people or with any of their gods, destroy their altars, destroy their idols, destroy anything that is associated with their pagan worship. And you must remain fully dedicated to me. In fact, God reminds them how essentially all of their firstborn of animals and child essentially belong to God. Verse 18, you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Abib, for in the month of Abib you came out from Egypt. So all that open the womb are mine, all your male livestock, the firstborn of cow and sheep, the firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. So this is going back in reference to that final plague in Egypt, where God killed all the firstborn in Egypt, but he spared the firstborn of Israel if they had applied the blood of the lamb to their doorposts. And God's saying, look, essentially, I bought them that day. They belong to me. The fact that I spared them means that the firstborn of your sons, your children, of your animals, it all belongs to me. And so he says, you're going to redeem it. In other words, meaning you're not going to kill your own sons as a sacrifice to God. And you may not necessarily even kill the firstborn of the animals as a sacrifice to God. But he says at the very least, there's going to be a payment or something that you're going to bring in recognition of that what you have is not actually your own, that it actually belongs to me, and that you're dedicating it to me as a part of this covenant. In the next few verses, God goes on to establish a few worship patterns for Israel, most notably that all of their males have to appear before him 3 times a year. This is sort of like the first version of like a men's conference, a men's worship conference, that God's saying, look, we need everybody to kind of have a reset 3 times a year to come back and worship me, reorient yourself to make sure that you are following the covenant, for the other men to keep each other in check, for the spiritual leaders of the people to make sure everyone's following what they should be. And so there's some principles there. He goes on later to give some principles for sacrifices, what they should do whenever they bring their sacrifices to God. And then Moses is able to go up to Mount Sinai and God re-records with Moses the Ten Commandments, and he gives them the law again, these other commandments. And interestingly, that it says that Moses was up with God for 40 days and 40 nights. He did not drink water. He did not eat bread. And this seems initially to us to be physically impossible, but we know that God is able to sustain us. And so during this time, clearly, Moses was sustained by the presence of God himself in being in that close place with God. But again, in this passage, we see great examples of exactly what God announced to Moses when he appeared to him, that he's gracious, that he's merciful, that he's long-suffering, that he abounds in this loyal love, this chesed, this love towards his people because of his relationship with them. And he proves that by continuing to reestablish his covenant, to re-announce to Moses his commitment to his people, even after everything that they have done, essentially spitting in his face, right? That he'd just given them the 10 Commandments, and they go and build this golden calf and say, these are the gods that brought us out of Egypt. They've forgotten Yahweh. They've forgotten I am that I am, the one true God. But God still says, you are my people. I'm going to carry you with me. And that he challenges them to become faithful to him. And you study the rest of the Old Testament, it becomes abundantly clear that the Israelites cannot be faithful to God. And that is because of their corrupted, sinful hearts. All of us have these corrupt, sinful hearts. We are born with them. We inherited this sin nature from our parents, who inherited it from their parents and their parents and their parents, all the way back to the first humans that lived on this earth. And yet, God, because he is faithful, continued to provide opportunities for people to turn to him. Most notably, in the New Testament, with the coming of his Son, Jesus Christ, who came, lived the perfect life that nobody else could live, was perfectly faithful to God in all things, and then offered his life as a sacrifice to redeem all of us. Not just as the Israelites had to redeem their firstborn, but to redeem all of us, to pay the price for all of us so that we can receive eternal life in him, and that his Holy Spirit comes to live in us so that we can learn and grow and be faithful to God. Because the Israelites couldn't do it without that power in their lives. We can't do it without that power in our lives. But still good to know that even whenever we're not fully relying on that power, and maybe we're not living our lives in complete faithfulness to God, that he remains faithful to his promises. He remains faithful to do what he said he would do. What an incredible God we serve. I hope and pray that something said today ministered to your heart, and I hope and pray that you go and share it with everyone around you. This is incredible stuff. Thank you, and God bless.